So we'll kick it off here with the keynote panel today at the Virtual Collaboration Zone, our 46th. And we're excited to have some real industry leaders here and appreciate all the members that have come and registered and are attending, and certainly our keynote sponsor, Harbinger Group, for sponsoring this particular session. I'm Christman, co-founder of HR Tech Alliances, and looking forward to learning and bringing the community together, collaborate, and sometimes co-opetate, which you may hear that word or something like it here in the next hour. So with that, welcome everyone, and I will turn it over to Seema, who is going to introduce the topic and the panel. Seema Chaudhary from Harbinger Group, welcome, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Ward. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our Virtual Collaboration Zone, 46th one. I'm happy to have our panelists today. So we're going to talk about how should system integrators and ISVs collaborate to deliver on the promised ROI to ourselves as well as the enterprises that we work with and the end users that we promise what they will get as a user experience and many other things. So I'm Seema. I'm with Harbinger Group over 2 decades and have played many roles, right from taking care of admins in the US, setting up office, all the way today to forming partnerships for our line of practices. I'm based out of Redmond, Washington. So what we have here today is I'm going to go quickly over what are we going to cover today. So we're going to speak about, first let's look at how to clear the noise and keep our focus on the bigger picture when evaluating platforms such as the large HRIS platforms or even mid-sized platforms, because it's very easy to get sidetracked with their features or how they market the products. Then we'll track the challenges, how to move faster and at the same time not compromise on the quality of our implementation process, and find the sweet spot between the speed and the long-term success of any platform implementation. And then break down into what really matters choosing a system integrator. And you'll hear from our panel, what is it all about? And finally, we'll discuss the most discussed sort of topic today is AI. How AI is shifting roles when it comes to system integrators and consultants. So this is just a brief. I'm sure we'll go into a lot more details further on. Just to give a background why this topic today is what we have seen, and from my team, we'll post the link to the chat session. The source of this information is what we've seen from this report is organizations are increasing their HR tech spend every year, yet only half of the HR leaders that were surveyed in this report admit that they can measure the business outcome or business value of their HR tech transformation, highlighting a critical gap between investment and impact. And this brings us to today's discussion. How should we, as system integrators and ISVs, collaborate to deliver on the promised ROI? So let's dive into the conversation with our panel members today. And I post the link to the Gartner report where this comes from. So moving forward, we have 4 eminent panelists here, Jeremy, Lauren, Dan, and Shrikant. So I'm going to ask all our panelists to introduce themselves briefly and at the same time, let our audience know what makes you interested in this specific topic and how does your expertise help get us forward in this conversation. Jeremy, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Seema. Yeah, I was trying to think of my relevance to this topic leading up to this morning, and I was surprised at the overlap in my career to this. So just a very quick overview. I started out my career actually in a company that competed against all the SIs as system integrators on the government sector and worked for them to start out my career as a consultant. And then flash forward, I worked for one of the ISVs, a software vendor, doing kind of the work on that side of things, called NewView in 2006 to 2010 timeframe. Had my own company for 10 years where I was playing the role of a boutique consultancy, but also competing in some cases against the SIs and also partnering with a bunch of ISVs. So over the course of those 10 years, I probably partnered with about 6 to 8 different vendors, rode their trajectory along with them, including with Dan Hines at Ultimate Software and others. And then I worked for another consultancy that kind of partnered a bit with the SIs. And then I actually worked for one of the large SIs for a year and a half. Accenture, I worked for a little bit and then left there. And now I'm back to both partnering with the SIs and delivering value to ISVs. So that's like a trajectory of my career and why I feel like I can say a few things about this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Lauren, if you would like to.
Hi, Seema. Yes, thank you. I am the founder of HR Software Solutions, which we are a boutique implementation partner. My career goes back. I started in human resources, so I always felt the connection to HR technology. I understand the business need of the client and what their problems that they're trying to solve from an HR perspective. I did implementation across many different platforms, all surrounding HR technology of some sort, whether it was recruiting or onboarding or the full platform. And the last 10, 11 years now, my focus has been in the Workday space. So I assist clients. I work with system integrators, but I assist the client in navigating the waters between their vendor, in this case with Workday, and their internal requirements. And I can totally see why 51% feel like they're not getting the value. And so that's why I'm interested in this topic, to try to help my clients to really be able to see that value.
Thank you very much. Dan?
Yes. Good morning. Good to see everybody. Dan Hines. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Alliances at a company called Intellum. For you that don't know Intellum, we're a learning management platform that help organizations educate customers, partners, employees, and do quite a bit of work in the go-to-market sales motion for organizations. Companies like Google, Meta, X, Walmart, Pinterest, Amazon, all use our platform to educate those types of audiences. But prior to this role, as Jeremy said, I've worked the last 28 years in the human capital management space in sales leadership, business development, alliances at both ADP, Ceridian, and Ultimate Software, which then became Ultimate Kronos Group, UKG, where I led a team of about 18 folks facing off to all of the SIs and building out the entire SI channel from the ground up at Ultimate, and then integrating Kronos' ecosystem into a large kind of 80 plus SI kind of group across the globe. I've kind of been on both sides of this transaction as well from a sales perspective. I think the interesting point of view that I come in here with is that many of the organizations, all three of those, and even my current employer, all have started with all of our implementation ourselves, our professional services teams internally. And what I've been working on for probably the last 15 plus years is changing that model and moving that model from we do everything in-house to leveraging all of the expertise of consulting firms. And not only is that a challenge just as a whole to change that parameter or that mindset, but you also have sales folks that are accustomed to selling a certain way and customers buying a certain way. And so that's been interesting. So what makes me interested about the topic is just HR folks have really had a challenge of trying to quantify the impact or what the business outcome is of a particular technology. And then how do you stand it up effectively and efficiently? And where does these SIs and or consulting firms help in that process? So that's my point of view on it today.
Thank you very much. Shrikant?
Hey, thanks, Seema. Hello, everyone. My name is Shrikant Patatil. I'm President and Chief Technology Officer at Harbinger Group. Very happy to be part of this panel with Jeremy, Lauren, Dan, and you, Seema. Looking forward to the discussion. A bit about myself. In my current role, we do content services, technology services, and we also implement large platforms in the HR learning space. My role is to oversee the strategy of how we go to market with all these services, as well as how we efficiently improve our service offerings and how customers can get better value of what we are trying to deploy or trying to build. Harbinger works with two customer segments. One is the software vendors themselves, helping them build or extend their platforms in different ways. And most of the vendors that we work with are in the HR, in education, e-learning kind of space. And we also work with end customers who are trying to use this software. And for most of the customers that we're building software, we also implement their applications at end customers. So this topic is quite interesting because part of us is helping vendors build platforms and part of us is implementing what we are building at end customers. And it's an interesting give or take in terms of what we do on one side and what we face on the other side in terms of when we try to implement something. And how the collaboration works in this new age where there is so much of automation expected, where so much customers as well as vendors are expecting that everything works out of the box, but is customized and is unique to their own situations. It's an interesting position for both vendors as well as SIs and consultants as well to navigate. And I think there'll be a lot discussed here today. I'm happy to share my views and experience and also learn in terms of how we could make things better. So looking forward to it, Seema.
Thank you very much for the introduction. We have diverse interests at the same time. We are addressing the same challenges in similar domains. So thank you very much. So let's dive into the questions. And our first question is for Jeremy. Jeremy, if you can highlight what methods, methodologies can enterprises use to ensure that their platform selection process is objective driven?
Platform selection is an area that I've spent a lot of time. It's a great example of kind of that three-way intersection between the ISV, the software vendor, the enterprise that's buying the software. And if there's a consultant either helping or that's going to end up doing the implementation work, then it also brings into bear like either SIs or boutique consultancies. Like I said, a lot of time spent on those methodologies. I think for me, what I always do if I'm the one kind of driving or involved in the selection process is that I don't start with the software itself and what the software is trying to get for the organization. I always start with kind of I call it a fears and dreams exercise with the enterprise. What are you afraid of if you go through this entire process? What do you hope to get out of this entire process? And doing it that way, you take out of the equation, can the system handle position control? Can the system track California overtime and all that like mundane stuff, and get at really what is it that the organization is trying to get out of this whole process? So for me, it's just starting with the softer side of things. You can always retrace that and tie it to objectives that you need to get out of your human capital management technology, but at least you're not starting with the really mundane stuff that is going to be in every single RFP and every single RFI that's ever been written. I'll pause there.
Anybody wants to add to this?
Just to add to what Jeremy was saying is that I think it's really important for the organization to really understand what it is that they're trying to solve for. Why are they looking for a new system? And they really need to understand that before they just select something, because every system can do all the basic functionalities from an HR perspective if you're talking about HR technology. But what is it specifically that you're trying to solve for? And I think they sometimes forget that. So that's important because, as Jeremy said, like all of them are going to do the basics. They'll be able to pay the taxes. They'll be able to do the basics. But what is it that separates your organization and makes it special where you need to really focus in?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and I'll piggyback off what Lauren said, is what business problem are you trying to solve? And what business outcome are you trying to achieve? Those are the two primary questions that should be asked in any one of these evaluations. And I think that there's also is a couple other components that may be controversial. I don't know what I'm about to say, but is your advisor truly agnostic? Are they there to look at what your current state is, what outcomes you're trying to get to, not based upon the applications that potentially their firm may implement? So a lot of opportunities that says, I've got Oracle, SAP, and Workday practices that I deploy. So when an evaluation goes out, who are the three people that are in the evaluation? And where is the fourth person, the one that's the outlier, and how do they feel about that process? I sat many years at Ultimate Software on that very paradigm of I'm in there with a large firm that's running this, and there's an opportunity for them to do work on 3 of the 4 systems because they have resources there, right? So that's number one. Number 2 is does the provider, are they listening to you? Are they seeking to understand what you're trying to do? Or are they just trying to sell the feature functionality and the glitz and the glamour? And I think the challenge with our folks today, our buyers in HR, is it's the shiny bright object. And many times what we see is that shiny bright object has nothing to do. What's the business problem? What's the outcome? That shiny object, if you said, how does that actually help you do what this is? That's where the connection point fails. And it's like a cat. You chase the shiny object because that's what many times a provider wants you to do versus trying to solve your issue. And I think the last one, which is my more controversial one, which is the selection committee at the companies, the buyers. Are those people that are part of the selection looking at what's best for the business outcome? Or are they looking at it what's best for their career? And what I mean by that is that there are a number of firms that are selling aspirationally to the buyers. If you get this background on your resume, you will have job security for X amount of years, right? So there's that, what's good personally, what's good for the business. And I think that's the challenge that we see is this is what's happening in these evaluation processes. So how do you ensure the selection process is objective? You have to make sure you're looking at all of those.
Very good. Thank you.
I can just chip in. One more thing, what we have seen success, it gives more confidence to customers is if the vendor, the consultant, as well as the system integrator is all part of the presentation so that they all understand what they're trying to ask for. And it's not later passed on as, now the consultant will solve the problem or now the SI will solve the problem. In the buying process, if the customer talks to all of them, chances are that their implementation will be much smoother. And even if they have some extra expectations, they will be done a lot cheaper.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to our next question is to Lauren. I think this is a perfect question for you, Lauren. With implementation cycles getting shorter, everybody wants it faster now. How to balance speed with quality and avoid rework?
Thank you. So this is just from my experience. I think some people are skipping that initial step that we just discussed, where they're actually doing an evaluation process, where they're actually digging into determining what does the business need? Why are we here today? What are we trying to solve for? Why are we here? I think that is one of the issues. They see one solution as a holy grail, and that's what they're going to go towards just because in their industry, that's what people are using, or they know somebody who uses a specific solution, so they want to go in that direction. And then the other thing is, if finance is leading the engagement in any way, shape, or form, let's just get it in, let's get it going, and then we'll figure it out later. It's never successful. It never works. And I think what has to happen is that step back has to be taken, and you need to bring somebody to the table who can really help you understand what are your key drivers, what is the most important piece to your implementation. Now, my experience is really all in the HR technology space, right? So the ultimate goal at the end of the day is to make sure that you're paying your employees properly, that they get their paycheck accurately. And then we have to then back into that. Having the right people at the table, because your implementations are getting shorter, they're getting faster. They are very focused on just the initial framework, right? Let's just get HR up and running. Let's get payroll functioning. Let's get benefits functioning. All the rest is really put off till phase 2. And what I'm seeing with my clients is because of the speed of what they're doing, they're losing the quality for sure. And then they're always going through a second round of an implementation, and they very rarely get to phase 2 until maybe 1 to 2 years after. So my feeling is you need to bring people to the table sooner who really understand. I think Dan said it, make sure that the people who know what the problem is are at the table for the decision and for the planning for the implementation. What is the most critical? And it could even be that the senior person in HR maybe doesn't really understand what the problem is all the way down at the payroll level. You really need to have all of the key players at the table because everybody also has to buy into this shorter methodology, shorter cycle. And what does that mean from your day-to-day staffing? You can't have your day-to-day staffing running your payroll and doing an implementation at the same time.
Yeah.
Add to that, Jeremy.
That's great stuff, Lauren. You nailed it in many areas. I can almost rewrite that whole title to say something to the effect of, with promised implementation cycles getting shorter, how do you avoid the perception of a lack of speed? because that's what's happening. Clients don't want to spend as much time in the process. The ISV wants to make the sale, and so they want to commit to that promised shortened timeline. It also tends to mean reduced cost, right, for the implementation. And so there's a financial component to that. But in the end, you're still implementing important functionality like payroll that has to be right. So it's just this juxtaposition of what's going on. And the ways you can combat that is its methodology, its automation in the implementation cycle. And I mentioned this in the pre-work session that we did for this. It's really super strong project managers who can take those things, can take the methodologies and actually deliver. And a lot of times work with very challenging and time constrained clients because they have so many other commitments going on during the implementation, and work with them to actually deliver something on time and on budget. So to make that happen is all the stars aligning, which is challenging, but there's ways to do it more successfully than not.
I would add, I think there's three things. One is clearly understanding the roles and responsibilities during the implementation. Who is doing what, when, and how. And it's important to your people, right? You really got to make sure that they understand what their expectations are as part of the implementation process. I think the data and understanding what data has to come across, where it is, what's clean, how much do we take over? Because most of these folks are taking and going from one system to another. So either we're going to do a lift and shift and just do everything that we did before in the other system, right? And the other system makes things go a little quicker. So you just get to a bad outcome faster. That's what you think about it. And then one of the last pieces is the change management component. That's the piece that gets cut. That's the piece that's probably most important, is what you did today, what it means tomorrow, what does it mean to you individually? And then ongoing, if you're doing these fast implementations, that's great. We got the system up. The instance was turned on. Our data's in there. But do we truly know how to use the system effectively? And if we don't, think of all the errors and challenges, et cetera, because we didn't do change management. And quite frankly, there's really a lack of education ongoing about how to use platforms. That's what we do, right? Shameless plug, but the ability to educate the customer on how to use the application so that they can get the results that they were promised in the sales process, or that they thought they're going to get based upon the outcomes they're trying to achieve.
Great point, Dan. Just to add to this whole lift and shift concept, right? Many a times when we get our requirements from software vendors or customers, it's a lift and shift. And nobody defines what is beyond lift and shift. One of the implementations, I remember, it was probably a year ago, we got this lift and shift. And the customer was not from software background. So what was sold was lift and shift. They interpreted it as the entire interface of their new HR application would be exactly the same way that their old application was. Just that it would perform better, it'll handle more data and stuff like that. And we realized 1 month later, that's what they understood about lift and shift, that the interface, so that they don't have to retrain the people, how to use the software. It's good, a look, and all the buttons and things were the same. And it was quite a big undertaking. It was like 3 or 4 months to almost get close to what their requirements was. And I'm sure ultimately they were unhappy and it didn't pan out the way it was supposed to be. So customer education of how they should be using new software, what lift and shift means, what exactly are you getting? If not clarified, it probably pains everybody in the process.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of the software providers do a really good job of educating the partner, how to implement it, what to do, how it works, what's the latest functionality, what's the different pieces that are going to make it a successful implementation. And I think that's the kind of education pieces. It's kind of like the carrot and stick, right? For customers, right? You have to create a training environment or ability to learn how to use an application. It's got to be the carrot. You have to make it engaging, has to be in the flow of work, and it has to be really in a way that is consumed or is expected to be consumed for who are the people we're talking to. It's Gen Z, it's millennials, right? They are not going into a traditional LMS. And the same thing for partners. They have to be engaged. Now, if you're doing compliance training, OSHA training or whatever, and you have employees, if they don't do it, you can shut their PCs off and that's access to their computers. But I think in the customer and partner side of the house and that ongoing education, because technology is changing so fast, the feature functionality is changing so fast, the releases are happening instantaneously. If the customer doesn't know how to absorb it and consume it, and the partners don't, that's great. That doesn't bring a great success at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for a great discussion. So I think with Dan's vast experience of many years from UKG, Dan, what role does an SI play beyond implementation? Actually, you just mentioned a few points from that. Should they be seen as extended customer success team?
So I think of like advisory firms helping from a strategy and a vision perspective. I think the advisory firms that companies work with should be viewed as like an extension to what your strategy is, right? I almost think of like my financial advisor, right? They know what your end state needs to be, and they're helping you along the way to do that. So think of like your advisor as your financial advisor, just as you would personally think about it as for what you're trying to achieve for an organization. And then I think within advisory firms, if they had the capability to deploy and do the technology and enable the technology, then that's great. They're really there to ensure that the work and the functionality and the technical and all of that meet what the strategy can do. Because I think a lot of what happens is companies have this great strategy. Like, I want this system to do A, B, C, D, and E, and I want it to wash my clothes as well. And at the end of the day is the SIs, the ones that are really good, understand to the detail. And this gets back to the education pieces. What can the system do? What can it do? And if I need to, I have to advise them on the process in which you can get that result that you want in the technology that you actually have purchased. I think what we end up doing is we come up with all these great processes, and then they go to put them in place, and then they get disappointed that the system can't do it the way it needs to be done. I do think that the SIs or the advisors, many of them offer an extended services, managed services, or if you will, premier services, which allow ongoing support of the applications. Year-end support as you're going into your W-2 season or quarterlies or taxes, or open enrollment is another big area, especially in HR, right? That tends to be a very difficult and challenging time. Performance review processes, et cetera. Because of the expertise, many of them offer these premier services, and they can bundle them in per employee per month cost, or perhaps a monthly cost overall, that enables you to make sure it's like having just an ongoing health check and making sure that those critical times, open enrollment, year-end processing, W-2s, whatever it might be, onboarding, et cetera, that they're there. So I definitely see them as an extension of the strategy and of the team, just as a financial advisor would be to you and your personal wealth.
For me, so much of the answer to this question, or actually the word should, is how well is the actual ISV doing to conduct that role themselves? And how successful are they in providing that kind of both frontline support, tier 2 support? Are they meeting their SLAs? What's their system downtime? Like, there's so many things that go into where there's variables, and there's so much variance by ISV that I think the answer to that kind of is, number one, it depends. And like, how well is that SI going to actually jump in to help that particular situation? Obviously, an SI is going to want to sell any type of service that they can to a customer. Should they be selling those services? That's kind of what the question is looking to answer. It's been an interesting stretch on the ISV side of things in the last handful of years. They're equally stretched by turnover, by challenges on the sales side of things, so on the business development and market share sides. As a blanket statement, it hasn't been the greatest stretch for the ISVs to deliver what the customers need to be successful. So it has opened the door for the SIs to play a larger role beyond implementation. But again, should they? And one last point that I'll make, it's not just has the SI signed up a customer for some kind of managed service or some tier 1 support, or even just to do some optimization or whatever. It's also has the ISV kind of empowered that SI to do the things that they need to do from an access standpoint, from a tool standpoint, from a like being there to support and warranty work that the SI has done. There's a lot of ways that can be either successful or be challenged down the road.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks, Dan.
Just to piggyback on that, Jeremy. So what I see is, depending upon the methodology that you've selected as the customer in the direction of what you're implementing, is how much they care about your customer success, right? Some projects, if you purchase this level, you get change management consultants. included in that. If you don't choose that, then you don't get change management and you're just left to figure that out on your own. So I think if the vendor really wants the client to be successful, that should be included in no matter what methodology is selected. Because now they're going to rely on the SIs to try and play that role for them. And I think that's a little bit of the challenge that I face. You're not brought in ahead of time, you're brought in late, and then you're trying to help them achieve the success that the vendor has left that gap open.
You're right. When you think about change management, there's some larger technologies or more robust technologies in the market space coming down into non-traditional markets that they're serving. We're seeing an Oracle, an SAP, a Workday coming down into the mid-market with a very powerful application that they're trying to box in and, if you will, make it a very easy kind of deployable solution, but it's still the robust big engine, right? And then you see those smaller firms, a Ceridian, a Paylocity, a Paycom, where they're selling it's really simple to use. So will change management need to be in that solution? Maybe not. Whereas coming down into the market with a robust solution, trying to box it in to make it simple and easy and quick to use. So I think a lot of it depends on the complexity of the customer, what they're trying to get to. But again, as a lot of people are buying is, like Lauren said, I want this solution. My friend has it. My neighbor has it. I see all the commercials on TV. I guess I should have it. And that's where I think that's that personal, what's good for me versus what's good for the business. And that's that intersection of what's happening in the market.
So thanks, Dan and Laura. We worked with a couple of customer success teams, and where we see that they're good customer success teams, their intent is to make sure that the customer is actually using the software and using it in the right way. And they are finding proactively gaps as to why is the usage. Our expectation is 50% of the customers should be on my system every day or every week, sort of stuff. So just to give you an example, when we implement learning platforms, what we've seen is if you sell out of the box, just implement it and give a set of courses, then the customer's interaction with that is pretty low. They only come in when they have to comply because their own content is not transformed. It is not made enabled for that particular platform. So they don't do that. And if the customer advisory team of the vendors is playing a better role, then some of the transformations that they can do themselves, and some of them they can say, oh, these are your very high-end courses. Maybe you need to modify it to work better, to get better recommendations, get better personalization. So you need to change them a little bit. You need to modularize. And that's where SIs can play a little bit more role, work hand in hand with customer success, to even grow their business a little bit, but ultimately keep the eye of whether it's providing value to the customer in terms of the software that they bought and how frequently they are using it and they're getting the ROI or not.
I think you're right on that. And the learning platform side, the education piece, is you get out of the box courses. It's great. Here's all the courses, go take them. And what you don't know the efficacy is for any particular class, program, or training or module. And is it personalized to that user, that persona, or even the product or application you're trying to get them to understand? If it's generic training on a process, that might be one thing. But if it's specific to an application, that's much different.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining it so well. So moving on to one of our last questions here, a little bit dive into technology. Shrikant, if you can take this up, where should AI take the lead? And where should human expertise remain critical in the implementations? It's a pretty deep topic, actually, but maybe from experiences, you can share some of your thoughts.
I wish there was an easy answer saying that this is what AI should do and this is what humans should do. But that gap is either getting extended in some places or bridging in some places, depending upon how you look at certain softwares and certain implementations. If you look at the implementation industry over the last 20, 25 years from SaaS onwards, there has always been a drive towards automation to do things more using templates, scripts, making it easier and easier. Of course, the generative way of doing it was not there, but the whole template waste and making it faster, better, that thing has been there. And what I see is most of these templatization as well as scripts that needs to be generated. Now companies will start using AI to build them as well. So they will get built faster and cheaper. However, when it comes to understanding a particular customer's data, their way of using a particular software is concerned, you may not have enough information to train the AI to generate things and maps and all that kind of stuff. So that part is still going to be very human driven. And most of the people have not even written these things. It's in their heads. And some people are doing this for years. So you have to actually get from their minds and then implement something new and so forth. So there, I think you will still need a lot of human intervention and thought process and stuff. But what we are collaborating with some of the vendors is like, for example, if they created a HR solution or learning solution for a particular domain, let's say retail, now they are venturing into healthcare and they don't have enough proof of concepts or templates or UI to showcase that. We can build that using AI very quickly and help them compete and convince customers that their softwares will work in that particular industry. So doing some of these templates, POCs, giving customers the experience of how it'll work for them probably can be done and enabled to AI without having that kind of a risk. But when it comes to actual data mapping and understanding the customer needs and doing it, there, I think there will be a lot of human intervention and intelligence needed. So that's how I see it. But of course, AI is evolving day by day. What I say today may not be true 6 months after.
I think there's like, to what you said, data validation, maybe kind of creation of instances, preformed instances. Maybe it's our best practices are in healthcare is these are the key areas that and the fields that we would create an instance. I think that there could be some of that data validation on duplicity and job titles or grades or rates or whatever it might be, using that some type of an AI tool to synthesize that. I think especially in the mergers and acquisitions side of the house, here's one environment, here's another environment, the similarities, where's the differences? Large companies coming together like Ultimate Software and Kronos coming together to become UKG, 6,000 employees and $1.5 billion in revenue each. How do those two come together to create one unified way? I think AI could be very helpful in those areas. From a personal perspective is I think these implementations, it breaks down to, do you have trust? You can't just basically flip it and tool it and put all these templates together and now you have a system. I think that would create a lot of apprehension without the human element. I think that there's nuances in every single company on how they use their current technology. And you may not be able to capture that. We use it, but we do it this way, or we have a workaround that does this. You're never going to catch that in an AI bot. And then I think defining and measuring for success and what success means to them, and maybe that's going to be hard to put an AI bot on. From the world that I live in today in the learning space, I think we're seeing the ability to take data, right? So people have a lot of data, and out of all this data, how do we instantaneously create learning objectives out of it and then be able to test and validate for understanding for people? So I think a lot of times you have a lot of data, but you don't know how to actually formulate questions, synthesize what the key points are in learning objectives, and quickly get it to the people for them to consume it and take testing and certifications. I think in our space, I think AI is going to be a really big agent for us.
Great stuff, Dan. I feel like there's a bit of a critical moment right now, almost like a mini competition. Or actually calling it mini isn't even fair. It's like this global competition, actually. And it's AI versus humans going on right now. I think that humans should play the lead role and AI should form the toolkit that the humans have to basically shepherd a process through an implementation. I feel like humans have failed for a little while now in certain areas, in particular, some of the process side of things, some of the time management, some of the budgetary side of things. There's definitely a need for there to be some automation that gets layered on top of that. But as far as the competition goes, if you don't have strong PMs in the mix, if you don't have people guiding the process, unfortunately, those who are really incentivized to have those implementations be better, cheaper, faster, are going to opt to do more in AI versus let the humans do what they can bring. And that would still mean there's still a need for that subject matter expertise from the humans, from the experience of 20 years of doing these implementations and subject matter expertise within the individual areas of human capital management. but some of the other side will flip over to AI. So for now, I'm relegated to whatever the ISVs are putting in place as far as methodology, not necessarily building out processes that are entirely AI, but have components. It's going to be interesting to see who kind of wins that competition.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the insights on AI. We will vary a little bit on the AI versus human, and that's a good challenge. Moving on to our last slide, I'm going to do some key takeaways. Actually, in chat, there is really good insights also. To wrap up this, there is so much wealth of information that we've received today from all four of you, your expertise and your experience, and good discussion. So a few key takeaways that I have. First of all, I think the key players need to be at the table to make decision. And just like Jeremy also said, key players, key decision makers, and also project management, people who will execute those projects. And before that, business problem, what's the outcome? What's the success that we are looking for? So all of these key players need to define that. They need to understand that. That's one thing that I learned. Another thing that Dan brought a good point is change management. Nobody thinks about this and highlighted what's lift and shift. People don't know in enterprise world. They doesn't have to know. That's why I think the SIs and the ISVs and the consultants are there, the advisors are there. So look at advisory firms as extension of the customer success team, or the SIs as the extension of customer success team, which is, I think, a cultural shift that needs to happen sooner. And again, I think some of the really great points made by Lauren in her expertise, that how to not to have to do rework, but bring people on early as the experts and save time, save money, and get the best out of the team experience. And again, lastly, as Shrikant highlighted, we're into that space, AI and human. And it's a great competition to have. I'm sure this question will be answered differently after a few months, every few months. So thank you very much. What I'm going to do is highlight a little bit about what we do at Harbinger. We are a product engineering company. We work with ISVs. Established in 1990. I have known this company since that time. I've been with this company over 2 decades. And Shrikant also started his first job with Harbinger 25 plus years ago. We work with some key platform partnerships, just like you see here. These are selected ones, and we're looking forward to forming a lot more meaningful partnerships for us. And also work with consultant advisors as our partners. We are about 850 employees based out of India. Our head office is in India. Our US office is in Seattle area, Redmond, where I'm based. And our customer focus is mostly North Americas. And as you see, we started in learning in 1990, so have Brandon Hall Awards, some AI patents because we are in technology. And this sort of journey goes on for our content creation, e-learning, and the technology side of the world. So that's about us. We're happy to work with HRTA as they bring a good combination, good companies for interactive discussions here in Collaboration Zone.
I'd like to summarize and say, I think this panel was world-class and certainly one that you don't see at other conferences out there. I'm glad that we had a chance to connect, and maybe next time we'll see this group together, we'll be on stage in Paris or somewhere, maybe one of the bigger conferences, because it's such an important topic. I really appreciate you guys digging in, sharing your points of view, and wow, really got a lot to digest, but there's a lot of work to do. So thanks again, Harbinger, for sponsoring. Thanks, Dan, Shrikant, Jeremy, and Lauren, being outstanding panelists.
Special thanks to Seema for being an absolutely fabulous keynote host and panel moderator, and our keynote sponsor, Harbinger Group, one of the founding members of the HR Tech Alliance's community platform. A huge shout out to our 2,000 plus members, especially our founding and corporate members for their continuing support of the HR Tech Alliance's community platform. It's our subscribing members who provide the primary funding that powers our community platform and empowers our mission.